Okay. Ready? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Independence City Council meeting. It's Tuesday, January 25th, 2022, 6 o'clock in the evening, and we have a pre-session work session today, and we're going to hear a little bit about sewer facilities and master plan. And so I'll have Mr. Fisher come up. I think that's where we are. And I think I turn the meeting over to you now.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the City Council. We're nearing the end of the wastewater facility master plan process. With us tonight, we have Chris Brigado and Pace Smith, West Tech Engineering, and Chris is going to be doing a presentation for you on the final draft of the master plan. The master plan was also presented to you back in September 28th of 2021, giving you an overview of how the plan was going to be laid out. And so tonight, we're just looking for feedback from council before we submit this to DEQ for final review and approval. We have a planning commission public hearing scheduled on February 7th and a council public hearing on March 8th. Following the adoption of the plan, I'll prepare a CIP. We'll do the methodology update for the system development charges and then move into the rates. We have an advertisement for the SDCs on February 2nd to get a consultant to do that work for us. And I have in the proposed budget for next year the rate update. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris for the presentation. Thanks.
Good evening, Chris, and welcome.
Thank you. Do we have some slides? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm new. Okay, here we go. Okay, yeah, so my name is Chris Brigado. I'm with West Tech Engineering. We're the city's engineer of record. And we're working on a number of projects for the city, and this wastewater master plan, facilities plan, whatever you want to call it, is one of the projects that we're working on. So I have some slides here I can go through, and then maybe at the end we can do questions, that sort of thing. So let's see.
Oh, it might need to be turned on. Sorry.
Okay, so why are we doing this work? Basically, what we want to do is look at the wastewater utility, look at the existing and future needs that are anticipated over the 20-year planning period, and try to come up with a list of recommended improvements with budgetary numbers that the city can then use for the SDC planning and user rate planning that Gerald mentioned. And typically these plans are done every 10 years. Things change, and these plans are typically updated, 10, maybe 15-year intervals. The other thing the plan does is it serves as a roadmap for future development, meaning there are several areas in the city that are undeveloped, and the plan can be used by staff and the development community to figure out like how to extend sewer service to some of these undeveloped areas when they do develop. Another reason we do these plans is we want to avoid haphazard improvements. For example, you don't want to put in like an 8-inch pipe to serve an area and then come back 10 years later and figure out it should have been a 12 and have to replace it. That's not a good use of the public dollar, and so we want to avoid those types of things, and the master planning process helps with that. And then finally, we want the document to satisfy regulatory and funding agency requirements. There's a number of state and federal loan programs, grant loan programs that cities can access, and they virtually all require some sort of facilities plan that's up to date and approved by DEQ. And so that's one of the reasons we do these things, so to make sure the city can qualify for those types of programs. The main player from a regulatory perspective is the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. They issue what's called a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit to the city, and that has the performance criteria, reporting requirements, all kinds of stuff that the city needs to do to be in conformance with the rules. DEQ also sets standards for the contents of a master plan like this, and so we have followed those standards. And then DEQ typically reviews and approves these documents to make sure that we're not missing something that they're concerned about, and to kind of check the engineering work that's been done as well. Just a quick overview of the process. Basically, we're at steps 3 and 4 here. We've produced a draft document that's circulating. I think you folks have seen it. It's been reviewed by city staff. It's ready for public comment by the city. Once we get some feedback from you folks and the public, we can revise the document. Then, as Gerald said, it's ready to submit to DEQ. DEQ will certainly have some comments for us that we'll have to deal with. And once we've adequately done that, then they'll issue an approval letter, and then it's ready for adoption, and the city can move on to the next steps. Some background information. We just look at the area inside the urban growth boundary. We're not allowed to look outside the urban growth boundary in accordance with Oregon's land use planning goals. For the collection system improvements, we assume that all of the land inside the urban growth boundary will be developed to the zoning standards that currently exist. We typically just look at a 20-year planning period. That's kind of the industry standard for these things. Any shorter, you're not really looking out far enough. If you look too long, your improvements can be sort of oversized, and it's kind of overkill. We are required to use population projections that are prepared by the Portland State University Population Projection or Population Research Center, and to give you an idea, that number in 2045 for Independence is a little over 16,000 people. Current population of the city is about 10,000 now. And then finally, we assume there's going to be no large wet industrial users, okay? And by that we mean like food processors or chip manufacturers. These are people that or organizations that would use a lot of water, 10 to 20% of the total water produced by the city or more. You don't have any users like that today, and you probably don't have the water resources to serve a user like that. So another way of stating this assumption is we assume that the industrial and commercial use in the city will remain roughly what it is today, have the same general character. Okay, let's see. Just a quick overview of the system. We like to break, in the plan, the system's broken into 2 main parts. The collection system, that's the part of the system that gets the wastewater to the treatment plant, and then the treatment plant is handled separately. There's roughly 3,600 connections in the city system. There's 163,000 feet of underground gravity piping that drains to one of 13 pump stations. Those pump stations pump to the treatment plant through pipelines that we call force mains, and there's about 20,000 feet of force main piping in the city. The treatment plant is a 4-cell facultative lagoon system, and that just means it's a facultative lagoons just means there isn't supplemental air that's added through some sort of mechanical process. It just relies on the natural processes that occur in the lagoon to provide the oxygen needed for the reactions that occur just to treat the organic material. The water passes through the 4 lagoon cells sequentially, and then on the tail end of cell 4, there's a disinfection facility where chlorine is fed. There's a chlorine contact chamber because chlorine takes a little bit of time to do its job. And then the treated effluent during the summer is pumped to a land application site at the north end of the city, and then in the winter months it's discharged to the Willamette River. That's in a brief nutshell, your system. The original system was built in the 1950s, and it was apparently a shared system with Monmouth. In the 60s, the two systems were split, and the city built two of the lagoons that currently exist. In 1978, the two more lagoons were built. So those are all the ponds you have today were built either in the 60s or the 70s. And then not much was done until 2000 when a new headworks was installed. And then here recently in 2020, the city installed the irrigation system. We call it recycled water system. That was done here recently, just a couple years ago. Oops, I went too far. Went too far. Oh, I keep going too far. Sorry. There we go. This slide kind of lists the major issues with the collection system. So this is the portion of the system that takes water from the users to the treatment plant. Basically, the older portions of the system are about 70 years old, meaning they're going to be 90 years old at the end of the planning period. So that is getting old. A lot of people don't understand pipes underground don't last forever. They're like anything else. They have to be replaced periodically. I&I is a problem, and I&I is a term that we use and everybody in the wastewater industry knows, but it's stormwater inflow and groundwater infiltration. So you can imagine you put pipes in the ground, they have cracks, groundwater gets in, and it's a problem because it has to be dealt with, has to be conveyed and treated like it's wastewater, and it costs money to do that. Every city in Western Oregon has I&I problems, and the older your system gets, the worse it gets. The city could use some improvements to the overall maintenance of the gravity system, and that'll become more and more important because that system is aging. Some of the gravity sewers are undersized and they're operating at their capacity, will need to be upsized. Some of the gravity sewers have reached the end of their useful life. They have grade issues. Some of them are in structurally in poor condition, that sort of thing. The 9th Street pump station and force main are undersized. During large winter storms, that pump station runs pretty continuously. And then there's capacity and age-related improvements needed at 9 of the other pump stations. And that's just related to normal wear and tear. The analogy we make with pump stations is they're kind of like vehicles. I mean, they just don't last forever, and they need to be upgraded periodically. So the city's done nothing wrong there. It's just that over the next 20 years, some improvements are going to be needed at those 9 pump stations that are listed there. And then the final bullet point there, just kind of a statement of the obvious, which is that improvements are needed to serve undeveloped areas. So there's areas that are undeveloped and they'll need new sewer facilities to serve them. So this is the list of capital improvements that are recommended for the gravity collection system. And the first 11 of these are really to address either capacity issues or gravity sewer pipelines that are reaching the end of their useful life. The remaining projects, G12 through G17, are there to serve some of the undeveloped areas of the city. And largely those would be built not with city dollars, but by developers. Okay, and the reason we put them in here is so that everybody understands how those areas are to be served and that wastewater is to be routed through the system. This is the list of pump station and force main projects, and it's the same kind of deal here. Basically, project P1 through P11 are all needed to address existing pump stations that are either undersized or will have components of them that will reach the end of their useful life during the planning period, whereas projects P12 through P15 are there to provide service to unserved areas. And the same kind of deal with the 4 force main projects. They're mainly to either provide service to areas that are unserved or to upsize undersized facilities. And then regarding the collection system, we recommend that the city establishes 2 annual programs. And these are going to become increasingly as important as the system continues to age and I&I becomes more of a problem. The city doesn't really have a formal cleaning and inspection program, or at least none that we're aware of. And so we recommend the city establish a formal program to clean the entire system and do inspections on a regular basis. Program 2 is really an annual program to begin to address some of those 70 to 90-year-old sewers, to start doing some replacement work, really trying to control that I&I that we talked about. Those remaining projects, M1 through M2, the city doesn't have a good map of the wastewater collection system, believe it or not. The city knows where the manholes are, knows where the lines are, doesn't know what the pipe materials are, doesn't know the age of all the materials, doesn't know the size of all of the pipes. So a better map would be helpful for the city to manage the system in the coming years. That's what that Project M1 is all about. Project M2 is there to try to identify the areas of the city where I&I is the worst, and then that will enable you to focus your efforts with Program 2 more effectively. Just try to find the low-hanging fruit where you can take out the most I&I possible. Yeah.
Chris, under the comprehensive map update and the sewer system study, do you mean annual project for 5 years? Do you mean do a study every year for 5 years, or is the study's going to take 5 years to do?
When you read the text, we think it's going to take the city about 5 years to do the work needed to figure out what size all the pipes are, what materials they are. And that's because you'll use that $66,000 a year Program 1 to do that work, okay? And you'll initially use that money to help kind of create a map and do that initial inspection of the entire system is going to take about 5 years, is what I'm trying to say. And so once that's done, then that information can be used to create a good map, okay?
Gotcha.
So that's kind of what we're getting at there.
Thank you.
And then the final project here, M3, is just kind of a placeholder reminder that at some point in the next 10 to 15 years, the city's going to need to redo this work effort, okay? So that's it for the collection system. Then we can move on to the treatment system. The biggest issue with the treatment plan is that it can't consistently comply with the effluent permit limits for BOD and TSS, okay? So remember, there's that NPDES permit that says what kind of water the treatment plant needs to produce, and it can't consistently do it. And the city's been fined recently as a result. And it basically comes down to the fact that the treatment plant is overloaded. There's too much organic material coming in, and some improvements are going to be needed in order to improve the performance of the facility. Something that's not helping with any of that is the second bullet point there, which is the sludge accumulation in the ponds. So remember, those ponds were built in the 60s and 70s, and all the solid material that goes down the drain ends up in those ponds and just accumulates over time, and it's never been removed since the 60s and 70s. And so we think it's time to consider doing that, because in the bottom of those ponds, if you have this much solid material, that's consuming volume that could be used for treatment. So that's part of the problem. There's the third bullet point there. There's a number of catwalks and piping and valves that were put in the 60s and 70s that are just sort of old. And if you go out there and look, you'll see some of these catwalks are pretty dicey looking. So there's some improvements that are needed there. The headworks is undersized. The chlorine contact chamber is undersized. There's actually an outfall pipeline that goes underneath the bottom of the lagoons. Okay, so the outfall from Monmouth goes underneath Lagoon Cell 4, and then the city adds their flow. And then the combined flow from Monmouth and Independence goes north under Lagoon Cell 1. So these are big pipes. These are like 36-inch diameter pipes that are underneath the bottom of your ponds that were put in the 60s and 70s, okay? So they were inspected, they look okay, but if they were ever to fail, like rupture, they would drain your ponds and you would have a major problem on your hands. And so we think it's a good idea to try to fortify those pipes just as almost a risk management thing more than anything. And then over the 20-year planning period, the irrigation system will need to be expanded. Okay, the system was initially built a couple of years ago with the idea that it would need to be expanded over time as the city grows. Okay, so the recommended improvements in the plan, they're actually really straightforward. There's not a lot of controversy here. It's pretty obvious to us what needs to happen. Okay, and so there's 7 projects here. The first 3 projects are the most urgent, and those are T1 through T3, and those are needed to bring the treatment plant back into compliance with the permit, okay? So there's a new headworks is recommended. The new headworks needs to have screening facilities because as part of Project T3, we recommend putting in aeration equipment in the lagoons, and the screening facilities and headworks removes the trash that's just naturally in wastewater, and that trash would interfere with the aeration equipment that needs to get put in. So the new headworks would have a screening facility to remove that trash. Project T2 is the biosolids removal, and then Project T3 is kind of the big project where it's basically adding aeration equipment to the ponds, okay? So like if you've ever been to Monmouth's treatment plant, they have aerated lagoons, and that's just really where Independence needs to get to as well. And that's what these first 3 projects are all about. Once those are done, then the city can move on to the remaining projects, which are increasing the size of the contact chamber. There's 2 kind of phases of the land application system expansion that are identified. And then that final project T7 is installing a fiberglass liner in those 2 pipes that are under the ponds to fortify them, prevent from failure. So the total treatment plant, number, if you add all those up, it's about $15 million, and that's a lot of money. But I can tell you, we do a lot of these plans for a lot of communities, and that's not that bad. I mean, that's on the low side of what we would see in a community like this. And part of that's because the city, did the big irrigation project and has been doing work. So it's not like nothing's been done here recently. So when you combine the collection system projects with the treatment system projects, there's a total of 43 projects that with a total budget of $35 million. Obviously, the city can't afford to build all those at once, and the city doesn't need to build all those at once. So the plan includes like a prioritization scheme, okay? So there's 3 levels of priority rankings that are assigned. Each project gets assigned a priority ranking. Priority 1 are the near-term projects that will definitely be needed during the planning period. The priority 2 projects are the longer-term projects that may be needed. A lot of them are growth-driven, or they're needed to address aging facilities. So if the growth doesn't occur as projected, or some of the facilities age more gracefully than anticipated, some of those projects could be delayed. Priority 3 projects are not necessarily needed. They're in there those are the projects that will serve the undeveloped portions of the city. They'll largely be built by developers instead of the city, okay? So there's a total of 11 priority 1 projects with a total cost of about $15 million. Of those 11 projects, probably the most urgent are the 3 treatment plant projects to bring the city back into compliance with its permit. Project G5, which is the C Street sewer, is a pretty important project. That sewer is in really, really poor condition and needs to be improved. And then Project P1 is the 9th Street pump station, which is currently operating at capacity. And will eventually serve a large area in kind of the southwest portion of the city, so it's be important to get that pump station upgraded sooner rather than later. There's a total of 15 priority 2 projects with a total cost of $7.6 million. And then 18 of the projects are priority 3 projects at a total cost of $12.6 million. So again, those are largely in there to show how, the unserved areas of the city would be served. And those priority 3 projects would most likely be built by developers. So the next steps, Gerald hit on these. Basically, we need to get approval to submit the plan to DEQ, or, some comments that we need to address in order to do that. And then the DEQ will review the plan, issue some comments, we'll deal with those, and then once DEQ's happy, they'll issue an approval letter, and then the plan can be formally adopted. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. And that's all I had for slides. If you folks have questions, I can try.
Questions for the presenter?
Yes, I have a couple.
Sure.
And this may be more for city staff, but the wastewater project where wastewater was going out to irrigate fields, has that been all settled and it's working well, or are there still issues?
It is operating. We operated it this last summer. It was the first run of the irrigation. There were some hiccups along the way. We've got them solved.
Good.
This next summer should be running without any issues whatsoever. We're still doing the last of the paperwork and closeout so that it's in compliance with our DEQ loan.
Good, okay. The second question, and this is kind of a gross question. The sewer lagoons can be dredged.
Yes.
Yes.
Does the takeaway have any value?
It can. It does have some fertilizer value, but...
Is it too expensive to process it?
Yeah, I think you're going to find it's more cost-effective just to put it in the landfill.
Okay.
And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but that's what most people are doing these days. We can get into the technical reasons why if you want.
Mm-hmm.
There would be some fertilizer value, but by the time you jump through all the hoops and do what you got to do and find a farmer who wants it, for example, just that the state rules allow you to use that, put that on farm fields, doesn't mean that the farmers want it,
Right.
A lot of these farmers have buyers that don't want that on their fields.
Mhm.
So there's just some issues you got to sort through. And I think,
Okay. I just didn't know if there was a price point where you could find some retail or future value for it, but obviously not. Okay. Thank you.
Is there a reason why we, as a city, have not looked at using ultraviolet disinfectant instead of chlorine in our water treatment?
Yeah, there's a really good reason for that. So you have these lagoons, and lagoons get algae in them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that algae is a real fine little particle that shields the UV light, and so you will never see a UV disinfection system used for lagoon effluent. It doesn't work reliably.
Doesn't the city of Dallas use that, though?
I'm not that familiar with Dallas's plant. I want to say that's not a lagoon system, but I'm not that familiar with their plant.
Well, I know that Dallas has done the sludge removal, and I'm pretty sure that they have UV disinfectant. I was just wondering if environmentally it was something we could go to. I think that might be better. But that's one of my questions. Two, are you concerned when we finally do remove the sludge that the weight of that will impact the 36-inch pipes that we have underneath
No,
the
because it's
ground?
typically done with a floating dredge.
Okay.
So they'll bring the floating dredge, it floats in the water surface, and it's got a suction.
And my final question is the C Street sewage problem that you're talking about. Does that also include storm drains on C Street?
No, that's not what we're talking about.
No, okay.
It's just the sanitary sewer.
Okay, perfect.
Other questions? Tom? go ahead.
So for your cost estimates, what are you using for an inflation value?
Well, those numbers are in today's dollars, okay?
Okay.
And so, part of what any future SDC or user rate analysis will look at is future inflation.
That's when we'll really calculate,
Yeah,
try to
we always-
calculate.
We
That's
always just give it in today's dollars.
Great.
And then, and obviously if you do a project 10 years from now, you have to increment that money forward, and there's a recommended method for doing that that's described in the plan, but there's a number of ways to do it. But yeah, all of those numbers are in today's dollars.
Please.
If we do implement this, what do we actually have money for? Like how much of this in the first phase or?
So I can answer that.
Okay.
So like I talked about, what we'll end up doing is putting together the capital improvement plan that will lay out basically the high priority projects. From that capital plan, we can roll out the system development charge methodology. It determines what is a capacity increasing project, how much of that project is capacity increasing. So that sets the SDCs. The balance of that is what the rate study will provide. And for large projects like wastewater treatment plant upgrade, we'll automatically assume that it's going to be debt. We'll take out debt through a loan with USDA or DEQ, and those will be built into the sewer rates. So we'll plan it out
Okay.
to deliver projects at a particular time based on rates and SDCs and what loans we can get.
So that total will be paid by the people of Independence in sewer rate increases.
Sewer rates and new development coming in SDCs.
Over what period of time?
Depends on,
It's a 20-year plan?
yes.
Thank you.
And the loans they vary from 20 years up to USDA has a 40-year loan. I try to avoid those because you're paying a lot of interest over a lot of years.
Great.
Any grant money available on that too?
Well, once you get up above a certain population threshold and your median income, you end up losing the opportunity. Doesn't mean it can't happen. There is money out there. The DEQ is basically converting into a grant in the loan, but it typically will happen at the end of the loan period. So they might determine when you're all done, we're going to go ahead and grant $500,000, but it's at the end of the loan period. So you pay the loan and then we'll
To
just
that
go ahead and
balance,
waive it.
okay.
Yeah.
Shannon, were you raising? Did you have? No. Additional questions? Well, this was interesting. And I do appreciate the fact that you did share with us in advance the thick one with just so the public knows there is a much bigger one that we've had the opportunity to read, and so that's it. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the city council meeting, but let's take about a 4 to 5 minute break, and then we'll get started at 20 till. Is that okay? All right.
Okay.
she was just on that board, so that's why I was
Yeah.
just like, I thought maybe she had insight that I didn't know.
Okay. Karen, you good? Jason, you good? Good evening, welcome to the Independent City Council meeting. It's Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. It's about 7:40 in the evening. This is our regular council. Let the record show that councilors are here except for Kathy Martin-Willis, who's out excused. Council members, you have minutes of the 11th and the 19th meeting in your packet, and do they meet with your approval?
Mayor, I have one change for the regular meeting minutes.
Okay.
Karen, in 5.1.2, you say the mayor stated he's not aware of the potholes on Monmouth Street. I'm sure he is aware of the potholes on Monmouth Street. We just can't do anything about them.
He's
I'm
not
sorry,
unaware.
could you say, it didn't come across, what?
I think it's
In 5.1.2, you say that the mayor is not aware of the potholes on Monmouth Street.
It's not,
unaware.
Not aware. Oh, sorry, I can't read. Never mind. Never mind.
You were channeling my son saying I was unaware. Anybody who's had
I'm
kids,
going to go
well,
back to sleep. Okay.
thank you. So was that a motion to approve?
A motion to
There we go.
I'll sec,
And a second by Counselor Takis. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
aye.
And opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. I don't think we have any visitor comment from the outside of what's listed, so without that, we have an audit report. And so I think it's to you, Tanya.
perfect.
Good evening and welcome to Independence.
Do I need to push this on or? Sorry.
I think you're on and we can hear you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. I'm here to present the June 30, 2021 audited financial statements for the City of Independence, as well as the City of Independence Urban Renewal Agency. I'm happy to report that we issued a clean or unmodified opinion. That's the highest level of a financial statement opinion that we can give on a financial statement. So we had full access. When we asked for anything, we were able to get it. And we applied limited procedures to certain pieces in the financial statements. So for example, the management discussion and analysis, which is actually one of my favorite parts of the financial statements, is not a part that we actually audit, but we go through it and we look at it to determine that it agrees with the information in the financial statements. One of the reasons that I love the management discussion and analysis is because it has a high level of information and it compares the prior year and the current year information. It kind of explains what some of those changes are. So it's a really good place to look to see, okay, where is the city at and where were they the last couple of years? One of the things to note is that the city is, it is an annual comprehensive financial report. You will note that if you look at the June 30, 2020 financial statements, this had a different name. It was a comprehensive annual financial report. There was a problem with the acronym, and so you will hear us not refer to the acronym at the previous reports. Now we're calling them ACFRs. So if you see the name of the report and you're like, what's going on? That's because the previous acronym had some negative connotations in certain cultures. And so we have changed that. So we're no longer using that, and that's been corrected in the city's financial statements. That was not something that the city had to do this year. They had a couple years to implement that. The city did go ahead and make that change to make sure that you're not offending any of your citizens or anybody that reads the report. That is an award program that the city is doing. So this is through the Government Finance Officers Association. And what happens is your financial statements are sent to external reviewers, and they take the time to go through and look at your financial statements to see how they're put together, if they have any questions on anything, if there's anything that they're concerned about. And I'm happy to report that the city received that award for the June 30, 2020 audited financial statements. And we anticipate that the city will receive that for the June 30, 2021 audited financial statements. You also received tonight the popular annual financial report. I know Gloria probably is going to talk about this, but the popular annual financial report is also an awards program, and the city is doing this and presenting this, applying for the award for the first time this year. So that takes a lot of time and effort. They are great because it's a high-level analysis of the city's information. And it has a lot of data visualization, so a lot of charts and pictures and things like that. So it helps for individuals that maybe have a little bit harder time when you look at the pages in like the annual comprehensive financial report that are just a bunch of numbers. It kind of breaks it down into the high level information. But back to the annual comprehensive report, in the very back, there's the statistical section, which has 10 years worth of historical information. So if you're kind of wondering, okay, how has the city been doing over the past 10 years? That information is actually in the financial statement. That's probably one of the things that takes the longest amount of time for the city to create, because you have to go out and get information on like the highest paid employee, the highest number of employers in the city or the county, depending on where the demographic information is coming from. It has information about city personnel. It has information about financial data, but it's a great place to look if you're looking at 10 years of information. I will say the one little caveat is that financial information in that section, the people that are in charge of our standards for government financial statements, the Government Accounting Standard Board, or GASB, has been very busy in the last 10 years, so they may not always be apples to apples when you're comparing them. If you look at the June 30, 2020 and the 2021, they're comparative, but some of the other years we've had a lot of changes in there, so you may see some places where it says NA or there's 0. It might just be because there was a change in our accounting, like the methodologies that governments use. So that's the financial statements. There is also a report in both the city and the urban renewal that is the report for minimum standards. So the Oregon State Legislature has some very specific things that they want municipal auditors to look at. So we look at things like ORS 279, which is the public purchasing rules, to make sure that if the city's doing any projects that they went out to bid appropriately. So we actually look and see that it was actually advertised in the paper, so everybody had an opportunity to bid on it. So they're not necessarily all financial related things that we look at. We do look at like Oregon budget law and things like that as well. There were a couple of items that we did note for the city, and that was, there was one fund that was over budget, which is the Information Service Equipment Fund for materials and services, but that's not uncommon to have some overages, as well as the other item that we noted was there was a deficit fund balance in the capital projects fund that we noted as well. That's usually a timing situation because you spend money and then you didn't receive as much in that fund. So does anybody have any questions for me on the financial statements on our report?
In the statistical section, the last 10 years, did you say the staff compiled this, or did your
No, the
company
staff
compile
compiles it.
Okay.
Yes, the
That's a lot
staff
of work.
compiles it and gives us the information. It's a lot of, it takes a lot of time and effort because there's so many different places that they have to gather the information from. It's not all just in-house information that they have. So they have to go to the county and get records. They have to, I mean, I believe almost all the schedules say a source if it's external, but it takes a lot of time and effort because there's a lot of pages in there and a lot of information.
And does the staff do this every time you do an audit report?
Because they're going for this award program for the annual comprehensive financial report, they do this every year. But it's going above and beyond. So in the state of Oregon, they're not required to do this.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to come in.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Moving forward, just to let you know, the presentation by Heather Thomas from the Women's Club, they've asked to postpone that until a future meeting, so we're going to just pass on that. I'm going to go down to reports at this, my portion here. And first of all, you have some committee appointments here in front of you, one for the Parks and Recreation Board, and then you have a restructurement of the Independence Days Commission at the request of that committee. So I submit those to you.
I just want to say it's nice to see so much city involvement in Independence Days Commission. I think that's going to make it stronger going forward.
Great.
I move to approve the appointment of Maria Blanco Arnejo to the Parks and Rec Board and the approve the restructuring of the Independence Days Commission.
Second.
And that's a motion and a second by Counselor Coeur. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to my report, I have a number of things to talk to you about. Last meeting, I mentioned that I'd be testifying in front of the Oregon Transportation Commission regarding the allocation of the federal funds that the Oregon Transportation Commission has. As part of our Council of Governments, we've taken a regional approach for our priorities in this area, and so a number of us testified. I spoke specifically about the importance of Highway 22 and 51, the I-5 improvement at the Aurora-Donald interchange, the next level at the Newburgh-Dundee bypass, and the Highway 18 in Fort Hill. There were a number of people from around the state that testified. There will be decisions made in the next coming months on how those additional funds are going to be allocated, but we were in there pitching, and it was really nice to hear mayors and county commissioners from other places also identifying, everybody's saying in the whole region that the projects I just listed were important. And I'm encouraged that 22 and 51, it keeps moving. It'll get done before I'm dead, but we just keep working it. Speaking of ODOT, I mentioned last time that I am not unaware, with all humor there, the potholes, we know that, and so city staff and I have been reaching out to ODOT, and they have crews looking at doing some temporary cold patching. Now, cold patch, I had to learn this from our public works person, but cold patching fills it for a little while, but then it breaks down pretty quickly. But they are keeping an eye on this, and I understand, I don't know for sure, but I understand that there have been some cold patches done. We're also planning for the ODOT regional leadership to come and take a look at Highway 51 through Independence and into Monmouth, because there are some considerable places where they may be able to do some additional work, reminding everybody that we don't own part of Main Street, Monmouth Street, and then when it goes over into Monmouth on their side, and we're not even allowed to touch those roads. It's just, we are not allowed. And so, but I know our public works people do make phone calls, and so we've been following up on that. You just heard some discussions about water and stormwater, and about some transportation. Well, Sean Irvine and I took Representative Paul Evans around showing him some of our infrastructure needs. I've got Senator Patterson coming next week to talk about some of those same infrastructure needs. I'm meeting with Congressman Schrader along with several other people from Polk County tomorrow. And then we have some of our congressional staffers that are coming from the Senate offices to talk to them about opportunities for funding and additional dollars and cents to take on some of the projects. Like, you heard the 9th Street lift station was one of those projects, and the dredging of the lagoons. We're looking at the Chestnut Street Bridge also for transportation. So we're putting the staff and I are working hard on putting that in front of people, both to see what allocations we might be able to get and where we can apply for grant funding and ways to deal with that. So working forward on that. The Coordinated Homeless Response Grant, as I mentioned before, the cities, all the cities in Polk County plus the county have submitted a request that's going through the legislature. We're one of 8 projects that were selected statewide to deal with homelessness, and we are focusing on rural homelessness. That project is moving forward to request funding from the short session of the legislature. That's House Bill 4123. Senator Patterson and Representative Evans, as I understand, are going to be co-sponsors along with others from around the state. And so we're seeking funding to move that forward. So that's a cooperative effort that I'm pretty excited about. Again, I remind people that on February 16th at 6 o'clock, the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments annual meeting will be virtual. It will last about 60 minutes. I would strongly urge you to put that on your calendar, and you'll get some information. Karen will send that out to. You can register in advance. It's free. It's okay, and they just need to have a registration so they know how to connect you in. So please take that. That's the end of my report, and I think we're going to Councilor Liaison reports. And so, Councilor Morton, you have 2 of them.
I do. The first is on the library, and the library has received a 2-year, $16,000 each year Go Kids grant, which provides electronic educational entertainment for kids, and I stress the educational part of that. They are also working collaboratively on the Communities for Immunity with several other groups, and will have 200 Thrive kits for distribution to local families with younger children. The library, believe it or not, is over 15 years old already. And the roof was guaranteed for guess how many years? And it's now failing, so the library director is getting roof repair into the budget, or he's working on that. Summer reading for 2022 will be called Reading Beyond the Beaten Path, and it will have many outdoor activities planned to go with it. Library hours have expanded, and our library director got us connected to a new program called Better World Books, which takes our culled surplus, that which does not go to the used bookstore at the historic library, and sells them through this Better World Books. They provide all the boxing for it, they provide all the pickup and delivery, and they don't charge any postage. And we get 10% of the net that they are able to sell any and all of these books for. It doesn't sound like much, but when you count, we have earned $200 so far. But when you count all of the work that they don't have to do in removing those extra books, that's huge. And before I go into the museum, I want to say that the Friends of the Library is working on a fundraising tool that has been used very successfully 15 years ago, and upgrading it and updating it for today's market. And the decision has been made to expand that fundraising tool to include the museum, so it will be a 2-pronged fundraising event, much of it virtual. We don't have a whole lot of, I know the schematics, but I don't want to share a whole lot of details now until we've had it fully vetted through the society, the Museum Society, as well as through both boards. So now on to the museum. The board is having mural work done and will continue to do that at the museum, and the director herself is painting part of it. It looks gorgeous. Current window displays that are in the museum and they're there in order to find, so that you as patrons can find something interesting to look at, even if the museum isn't officially open yet. They have been provided by the Smithsonian, and they will rotate money monthly until that collection is exhausted. The Heritage Museum Society, which is similar to Friends of the Library, Friends of the Museum, have increased their membership and is expected to be much more vibrant and with all the new faces that are involved. The director of the museum keeps a very comprehensive to-do list on a large whiteboard, which lends to smooth organization as the museum is configured. I've also heard that as people from city staff or public works come in, they try very hard to match them up with person to chore. And they're anticipating a grand opening in the spring. More information will come on that, and also on the fundraising event that they're looking at in late October or early November. That's it.
Thank you, Counselor, appreciate it. Counselor Roden, because I know you gave a report last time
Yes.
on WIMPEG, do you have anything
I have
new?
nothing further from the January 11th meeting.
Okay, thank you so much, appreciate it. Mr. City Manager,
Hello, everyone.
good evening.
Going to again start with good news, and I do have a short report tonight. So you have heard about our communications manager, Emmanuel, who we hired. He's here, and he's going to come talk to you. Come on up, Emmanuel. So I'm just going to move aside and let you ask him a few questions, because I know you had some that I didn't know the answers to previously. And he was excited to come here today, but I will just remind you, this is day 6. So still in the, learn the lay of the land mode. But Emmanuel, go ahead.
Welcome to the City Council.
Thank you
And
very
welcome
much,
to the
Mayor.
City of Independence.
Fellow city councilors. Again, my name is Emmanuel Goycochea, and I am the new communications coordinator here at the City of Independence. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, just so I'm just not some random face that you see now. But I'm originally from Astoria, Oregon. I was born and bred there, homebred Oregonian. And that town, if you're familiar with Oregon history, was where they filmed the Goonies. And so I think growing up in an area like that with such a storied and rich history really drew me to diverse mediums such as video or TV and books and things like that. And so that's really what I studied when I was in college, and then I took to my personal and private endeavors. And so for the past 7 years, I've been a content creator, and just recently I just finished working as the Director of Marketing and Communications at the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce. Excuse me. And it was in that previous role that I really discovered my passion and my zeal for civil service and engagement. And so now, when I come to you in this role, I'm just very excited to be a spokesperson for the City of Independence and really be a champion for the community. And although it's ironic, because although I'm here to be a very expert communicator, it's very hard for me to articulate just how much I love this community. Because my wife and I drove through it a couple years ago, and we were like, oh my gosh, Independence, we haven't been to Independence in 10 years, and it looks different than the way we remembered it. And we were just drawn to this place about how beautiful it is and how well it's been kept up. And so I'm just, I truly believe that the City of Independence is on a growth trajectory, and I cannot wait to be able to serve this community, and it truly will be an honor working alongside you all. And so if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
I'll just say something. I've been a 3-year squeaky wheel on communications, so it's definitely needed in this area. We have to be creative to find ways to communicate with people, particularly during COVID. It's been such a challenge. I'd like to see a variety of communication methodologies used, to try to hit as many people as possible, because if nothing else, we need to bring people into these meetings, we need to bring people into events, we need to share, what's wonderful about Independence. So thank you for being here. Good luck. Look forward to supporting you.
Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to take a moment and say I really appreciate it, because we had a chance to visit a few days ago,
Right.
and I made a suggestion about a great place to stop in, and I was out walking Buddy the dog an hour and a half later, and there I saw Emmanuel at Melting Pot getting goodies to take home. And so that's a great, so thank you, and welcome to Independence. We're glad you're here.
And Emmanuel, would you spell your last name?
Yes.
I want to send you an email.
Yeah, of course. It is, so my first name is Emmanuel, but my last name is Goycochea, so that's Goicochea.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, glad to have you here. Chief, to you.
So now you know why I just said Emmanuel. I had to, still working on Goycochea. But I'm getting it now, because, I hadn't really met him before. Goycochea, just keep saying it.
And you had met him before. You were teasing there, I know that.
Oh, I had, but I hadn't gotten a chance to sit and learn his last name as well as I have now. So.
Thank you.
Okay, an update on our recruiting firm. I have been working with them, and they should be reaching out to you individually in the next, I would say, day or so via email. And they will be looking for your 2 stakeholder names that you want to put forward for them to reach out to for inclusion in the day 1 interviews, right? They had talked about this. So I have asked them to just do that on their own. They're going to copy Karen on the emails, but it should be one of those blind copy emails, so try not to, if it isn't, don't start a communication amongst yourselves, right? Keep us out of trouble there, but it's supposed to be one-on-one, them to you, so that you can get that information to them, okay? They have arranged to come to our staff meeting next Monday virtually, so they're going to talk to all of the management team members about the recruitment process and what they want to see in a city manager as well. I'm going to take care of that all at once, just in an hour at a management team meeting. And they are working on their community survey, and they want to, today we talked about combining that survey launch and getting it out to the community with having a date for that listening tour arranged and part of that, right? So we're hoping that people will either do the survey and respond, or come to the listening tour virtually. We're going to try to set that up virtually to make it easy for people, or choose one or the other, right? But we're thinking if we could get it out at the same time, and we're going to ask Emmanuel to help with that and make sure that we can use our existing communication avenues to really push that out to our local groups. So that's where I am on that at this point. They haven't had any content creation for us to look at yet, but it really has only been, I guess, a week since, or maybe only 6 days since they met with us. So, continuing to work with Monmouth and the county on service delivery in our Monmouth Independence area. That is going well. We're still hopeful to have those community connector positions in place by March 1 on some sort of a temporary is the wrong word, part-time basis. They won't be full-time yet, but that is going well. Monmouth's actually working on an IGA so that we can engage with the county as a group and move that forward. Urpa funding is my next topic. So I feel from our last Urpa discussion, and then I've had a continuing conversation with Councilor Core via email, where it seems as though information may have come from council to the city manager, Pessimir, and maybe that hasn't all been shared, and I haven't done a good job of collecting it. So I would like to ask that if you sent anything to city manager Pessimir about your ARPA desires, because I know he solicited that, and Councilor Core sent me hers, so I have it. I would like everyone to do that. If you have sent something to Tom, please send it to me, and I will bring these back to a work session in February. We'll do a council work session and talk about ARPA. Does that work for everyone? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. The last thing I had was the WIMPEG dissolution. I did get a draft dissolution termination agreement from Monmouth, and moving forward on that. We're still working out the finer details, but I expect you'll probably see something in a February meeting where we're looking for final permission to do that. Any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Since you're talking about February meetings, I had a meeting with Brent DeMoe today. He would like to come to council and make the same presentation he did to Monmouth, which is just like basically a lay of the land of what he does. So I will just direct him to you.
Yeah, I actually invited him already, and he asked to wait until March.
He just sent me an email saying sometime in February, so maybe his plans have changed.
He should probably make up his mind. I tried to get him in February already, and so I will reach back out, and maybe he had a change of heart. But I would really like him to do the same presentation that he did for Monmouth. It sounded like their council really enjoyed it.
Great.
Perfect, thank you.
I do have one question. This may or may not be in your purview. It's totally unrelated to what you had said, but I had a question from a constituent about the, apparently there's some pretty vast erosion down by our new dock, and it's threatening to overtake some of the sidewalk areas and so on. Is that being monitored?
Yes. I think it's, well, I say yes. I saw some photographs. The area that I saw would have been between Riverview Park and the dog park on that stretch of trail, and you can't miss it. There's a yellow caution tape up cautioning that the edge is dropping right off now into the creek. But it was shared with me by the Public Works Director, so he is on it.
They're on it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right.
Actually, I have one question for you. Go
ahead.
Sorry.
So close.
I know, I'm sorry. Have we looked into, I called IES, Independence Elementary School, because their playground is isolated. And I asked them, why is your playground isolated? Because the kids aren't allowed to play on it. And they said that they have major drainage issues on their playground right now, and they're swamped out. Is that something we can help them with to get their playground back up, or is that just a school district issue?
That one is a surprise to me. I don't know. I'm going to look over and see if Fred has anything on that.
I think it's a school district issue, but I don't know. We hadn't heard about it. I hadn't heard about it.
I just noticed it myself because the playground had caution tape all around it, and I was like, why are the kids not allowed to play on the playground? And so I called the school and asked them, and was just trying to get more information on what's going on. So I don't know if there's a way we can help or what we can do.
Just confirming it is Independence Elementary.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I will at least look into it and see what the issue is.
Great.
Anything that's drainage related is an issue of the cities at some point. Because you just heard about how it all flows. It keeps flowing, whether it's wastewater or stormwater, it all
Right.
needs to keep flowing. So,
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Butch, I think it's to you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I really don't have anything to add to my report that I gave you for the second quarter. So if you've got any questions about that, I'm here to answer any questions. I would like to talk about our audit and the year-end financial statements, and kind of give you a little bit more information than the auditor is, able to kind of dive and talk about. And the one thing that I would really like to point out is in the urban renewal audit report there, in the even I was more prepared, sorry. On page 20, for our Urban Renewal Projects Fund, if you look in the actual column, all the way down to the bottom, where it says the ending fund balance, this fund balance is significant for the city because it has been in the red for most of the years that I've been here. This year it's in the black. And I would like to point out that there is one big project that has culminated into bringing the urban renewal back into a healthy fund balance, and that's the project of the Independence Landing. The urban renewal, the majority of its revenues are property taxes, and they're tax increment property taxes. And so those are collected from projects like this, like the apartments and the hotel. Projects like that are within our urban renewal district. This now, the urban renewal has over the years actually borrowed money from the city. And so now, because they are back in the black and will continue from now on to be in the black, they'll start paying off the city, basically the general fund and some of the SDC funds for what it has borrowed. So this is great news. This is going to help to eliminate a lot of our interfund loans. And I just really wanted to highlight that to you all.
I had a question about that. Now, we're still not receiving the full tax for like all the apartments that have just been built, so we'll be getting additional funds for that. And then there's the other properties that are still being developed. Correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So this is like the big part of it's done, and we're starting to see the good results. But you're correct, there's still more
more to come.
projects happening there.
Based on this number, how many years will it take to pay back the debt that was taken out to build those?
Good question, and we are amortizing it for 10 years, but with the projections that we're seeing now and relooking at those, we very, very possibly could get it done within 7 years. So
So the plans works.
it has worked
That's-
very well.
What I was going to say also is that we've known for a long time that this would result in positive figures that would drive us forward, but sometimes when you make the plan, you have to work the plan for a while before the plan comes to fruition, but now we're seeing the positive results.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's great that we'll have these paid off in 7 years, but I still would like to acknowledge that we have overcrowded an area downtown that didn't need to be crowded and built to this capacity in order to have this income. I think in the future, when we look at building and crowding a bunch of people into a certain area with not even having good parking and adequate space for people to be in, I'm not sure we should toot our horns too much on this. Even though I'm grateful that we're going to have it paid off in 7 years, I think the cost of building so much down there has put kind of a sour note in some people's mouths in this community.
Okay.
So the next item that I would like to talk about is that tonight was Tanya's last night for presenting the audit. Our auditors have resigned, basically, and they're going to move on to other things. They're going to not be auditors anymore. So we have, they have given us a template for request for proposals, and so we'll be sending those out. And I am going to request that those be returned, those proposals be returned to us by the 15th of February. So it's the council's responsibility for hiring an auditor. So I would ask if there's a couple of the councilors that would like to go through those proposals with me and the city manager, and pick a couple that we would like to maybe interview, or if you just like a particular one, that could be the one that we'll hire, and we'll present the next council meeting on the 22nd of February.
So anybody want to help
Yes.
staff? Counselor Morton? Does anybody else have a burning desire here? Okay, it's a small group.
But this is good to have rotation and auditorship as well.
It is, and I'm excited about this this kind of change of events. So we hire a contract accountant to prepare our year-end financial statements, and they're very complicated. And she's getting ready to retire, and so our auditors, our past auditors now, will graciously take over that contract and continue to draft our financial statements that go to the audit.
Gloria, if you promise there's some math involved, I will offer to help up with the RFP as well.
Okay,
Great,
thank you.
thank you.
That is all I have.
Okay. And just for Counselor on item 7.1, utility customer assistance, staff is asked to delay that for a few meetings. There's some follow-up and paperwork they're working on, so we're not going to deal with that until a later meeting. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Evander, it's to you. I'm going to have a public hearing here. So I'm going to open a public hearing and I get to read a statement. The This evening, we have a public hearing on legislative amendment 2021-04 to consider amendments to the Independence Development Code, non-conforming use standards. The City Council will make a final decision based on the complete record, including the testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings are being recorded. This hearing will be held in accordance with the land use procedures required by the city and the state of Oregon. This is a type 4 legislative procedure. At the beginning of this public hearing tonight, staff will identify the applicable substantive criteria from the city's comprehensive plan and/or state of Oregon statewide planning goals. For anyone wishing to speak, we're asking you to use a speaking card that are provided. And when called to speak, you must be recognized and state your name and address for the record. Before we begin, does any counselor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in this matter? I don't see anybody jumping up and down. Okay. I'm now officially open the public hearing for LA 2021-04 Development Code Amendment Revision to Non-Conforming Use Standards. To the staff report to you, Mr. Evander.
Perfect. All right. Whoa, hey, hello. It's very nice to be here tonight. This public hearing deals with a very simple code change, and it's one of those things that you might ask yourself, what in the world is a non-conforming use? And it's a good question. A non-conforming use is a use that no longer conforms with our zoning code, and it could be associated with things like setbacks, it could be associated with things like height, it could be a use that is not allowed in the underlying zone. And you know, as a planner, you tend to try and limit non-conforming uses if you can, unless there's a good reason for the non-conforming use. So what our planning commission has been doing is really looking at our zoning map and looking at our land use inventory and sort of comparing the two and seeing if there was areas where there was clear sort of discrepancies between existing land use and our zoning designations. And lo and behold, we found some of them. What this would do is recognize the fact that we have numerous apartments in the city of Independence that are not allowed in the underlying zone that they're located in. Currently, in the RM zone, which is our medium density residential zone, we do not allow apartments, yet we have several apartment complexes within that zone, including Legacy Oaks, Colonia Amistad, the Ash Creek townhouses. All of those are non-conforming uses under our code. Rather than go and try and change the zoning map, because we saw that, we thought, shoot, well, our non-conforming use standards say essentially, if those were ever to be destroyed, you cannot rebuild those. And we thought, whoa, that's potentially a problem, especially if something catastrophic happens, an earthquake, a fire, whatever it might be. So we were looking at that, and rather than going through sort of a process to essentially change the zones, which could be a fairly significant process, I asked our attorney, hey, would it be possible just to change the non-conforming use language to say if you have a housing style that's an alternative type, like an apartment in a residential zone that's not allowed, could we just change it to say you can rebuild it at that density? And she said, yeah, you could do that. And so we see this as a good, effective way to address the issue that we see with the non-conforming use standards in a simple way, and then at a future point, we'll likely go in and maybe tweak the zoning just a little bit, but that will be a future project. In short, that's the problem. The Planning Commission looked at this. They felt like this was a very simple change. I mean, you can see it. It's less than a paragraph. They held a public hearing on it. We issued a notice on it. We sent it to the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We did all of the stuff that we need to do associated with the code change. We have heard nothing about this code change at this point. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on it. Following that public hearing, they voted unanimously to recommend that you folks approve of the code change. The criteria that we evaluate this on are in our comprehensive plan. You'll note those in the staff report. We also evaluate it based on our requirements for a code change. It meets all of those requirements. So, based on all of this, both I and the Planning Commission recommend that you folks approve this code change. Are there any questions?
Questions for the presenter? Please, Councilor Joe.
So how did they build the apartments if they weren't allowed to? They just went to and asked if they could, and they were approved one by one, or if they weren't?
You know, I think it's a mix of things. Honestly, I think that some of them were probably inappropriately approved. I do think that that happened, but I also think that some of the apartments were constructed before the zoning got put down, and then when somebody was writing the zoning map, they just didn't realize
There was already something there.
that there was an apartment building there.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Councilor
You
Rhodes?
don't feel that it would be better to just not allow these to be rebuilt in the future and to go back to the original zoning?
It's quite possible. I mean, and that is a very real possibility of what could be done. I mean, the reality of the fact of the matter is we have something like 350 of these apartments that are in, apartment units at least, that are inappropriately zoned. That's a large portion of our existing housing stock.
And if we didn't rebuild them after a catastrophe, we'd have a whole bunch of homeless folks.
We would have that, I mean, yes, we would have a very difficult problem in the future if we didn't address this issue.
Additional questions?
I'd like to put a motion out there, please.
Let me, I'm still in the public hearing.
Oh, that's right.
So, yeah.
Excuse me.
Is there anybody else who wants to testify related to this? Without objection, I'm going to close the public hearing. And council, if it would be okay, and Karen's going to tell me if I can do this, can we jump ahead and do the legislative part on this so we keep the pieces together instead of doing both public hearings and then, so I'll do the public hearing first and then the legislative, then the vote on the change?
You would like to?
Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, let's go to page, is that 109? I'm just trying to make sure, trying to keep things so we don't go back and forth and back and forth.
So after the public hearing, though, there's a motion required after the public hearing before you get to the vote.
My mistake. I apologize. So, Counselor Morton, your
Yes.
your motion,
I move to approve LA 2021-04 and adopt the findings and conclusions in the attached staff report,
so,
or in the staff report.
thank you. I have a motion,
Second.
and a second by Takis. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's go to the actual legislation on this, please, and complete that. Help me get to the right page here.
75.
Am I in the right place, Karen? 109, thank you.
Just as a comment, it would be nice to have these, I know seems like it's a little different way we've laid this out. It'd be better to have it laid out so they're all together, so we can go through it just the way we're going through it.
Yeah, I understood. So,
So we're not voting on page 75? Is that?
no, hold on, let me get to the right place. And Fred, you can help me. We're looking at,
Looking at the actual ordinance,
yeah, we're trying to go to the ordinance right now. And is that page 103, please?
109.
109, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to the right place here.
You don't have it on
109, oop, there, they were stuck together.
I don't see that there's...
I'm obviously in the wrong place.
I don't have it either.
111,
A little bit farther.
sorry, I'm just,
Oh, I'm in the amended agenda, I'm sorry.
Are we supposed to be doing LA 2021-05?
What's on your screen?
Council Bill 2022-01.
okay, thank you, that was what I was confused about, and right, because I have the old one. Okay, so Can you scroll down here? Okay. And is this the ordinance? Yes, okay. All right.
Yeah, this is on page 101.
Yeah. All right. We're doing on 202201. And let somebody make a motion.
I move to read the proposed ordinance, Council Bill 2022-01 in full as the text is contained in the council packet for the first time.
Have a motion?
Second.
Second. Discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? Motion carries.
She's got to find
An
it.
ordinance amending Independence Development Code subchapter 10, general provisions, subsections 10-10.055, non-conforming use standards, and declaring an effective date.
Thank you. Motion again, please.
I move to read the proposed ordinance, Council Bill 2022-01 for the second time by title only.
Motion. Second. Second by Takis. Discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries.
An ordinance amending Independence Development Code subchapter 10, general provisions, subsection 10.055, non-conforming use standards, and declaring an effective date.
Okay, third motion, please.
I move to adopt the proposed ordinance, Council Bill 2022-01.
Go for it.
I got a motion and a second by Takis. He's on a roll. Is there discussion? I think we're all okay with this. Pretty straightforward. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Bill will pass. There will be assigned ordinance number 1593.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go
Can
back,
I bring up a short point of order?
please.
I don't hear the rest of the dais down here, and I'm not entirely sure everybody's voting yay or no. Is it okay to have a silent vote, or a vote that's not made orally when there was a call for a vote?
I think everybody's voted. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are you asking for us to speak up a little bit?
Well, maybe wave your hand or something.
okay, we're going to go back to the public hearing on 2021-05.
Now we're on page 75.
All right. So, first of all, I have to read this again. So, this evening we have a public hearing on legislative amendment 2021-05 to consider amendments to the Independence Development Code, amending subchapter 17 and 23 and adding a new subchapter 47. The City Council will make a final decision based on the complete record, including the testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings are being recorded. This hearing will be held in accordance with the land use procedures required by the city and the state of Oregon. This is a type 4 legislative procedure. At the beginning of the public hearing tonight, staff will identify the applicable criteria, the applicable substantive criteria from the city's comprehensive plan and or the state of Oregon statewide planning goals. For anyone wishing to speak, ask to use the speaker cards that are provided. When you are called upon to speak, you must be recognized and you must state your name and address for the record. Before we begin, does any counselor wish to declare an actual potential conflict of interest? I don't see anybody flagging me. So I will now open the public hearing on LA 2021-05 Development Code Amendments, amending subchapter 17 and 23 and adding a new subchapter 47. Mr. Evander, to you.
Perfect. So this code change is a little more complicated than the last one. This one would create neighborhood standards for commercial uses in residential neighborhoods, primarily targeted to the MX zone in the southwest portion of the community. But as I'll explain, it's been also sort of extended just a little bit to include the intersection of Corvallis Road and Mountain Fir and Hoffman and Gun Club Road as well. All right, so basically how this works is currently in our MX zone, we allow office having a maximum floor area of 2,000 square feet or less, and retail except drive-through facilities and vehicle servicing repair. Karen, can you pull open the map just to show folks where that applies? And so that primarily applies in our southwest portion of our community. And the zone, I think, was originally intended to be super flexible to allow a mix of residences, all that sort of stuff, but also give people the opportunity to potentially do some commercial use. And you can see where it applies, the MX zone, which is the green area in the southwest portion of the community and will eventually extend across that entire block. While that's great to allow that flexibility and allow somebody the opportunity to see a business opportunity and go in and say, hey, potentially I want to do a commercial use here, what I think I realized and also our planning commission realized is if you don't sort of like articulate how that's going to happen, it will never actually create what you want, right? And so that's what this code is trying to do. For example, under the current code, somebody could buy a house in Brandy Meadows, and say, I'm going to open a bakery in it. And they could open a bakery in it. Well, everybody else could have bought all the houses around them, not anticipating that that person was going to create a bakery in the house, right? And so somebody might have a bakery in that house, but there might be off-site impacts that people didn't anticipate for the neighbors next to them, all that sort of stuff. Also, if you do it sort of incrementally and piecemeal, there's no guarantee that it's ever going to create a vital sort of nice neighborhood cluster of a couple of businesses or anything like that. It just wasn't designed for that. It's designed, especially like Brandy Meadows, the example is designed for houses, right? And going in and putting in commercial use in there sort of after the fact won't ever promote the vitality or sort of the character that I think people want for the area. So what this would do is sort of go in and articulate how better to do it and actually like create a process to actually identify how this works. Right now, if somebody went into that, there's no design standards that would apply to it. There's no really anything that applies to that use other than the fact that site design review has to occur. That is just too open, too like random to ever promote the vitality that we would anticipate. So what we proposed is an approach that identifies where these areas might occur, and then as development is happening, as a subdivision is being created, the space really gets articulated at that point. So as somebody is dividing the land, they could say, hey, right here, I can see that a commercial sort of cluster can work here. It's at the intersection of two commercial streets or an arterial street, I should say collector street. It's at the intersection of two collector streets, or it's at the intersection of an arterial and a collector. Things like that where there's a certain amount of forethought that goes into the sort of the basic design and layout of these things. Also, so the space would get created at the time of a subdivision. And then also, when somebody went in to actually develop the uses, there would be then standards that apply to how it looks. Similar to our downtown area, we have a number of standards, design standards that apply to how new businesses in downtown look and feel and all of that sort of stuff. So it would pull in those requirements to development in that area. Hopefully that makes sense. So one thing that I'll just say is we did propose location standards specifically to say, some of these are not going to work on a local residential street, It's not going to work to put these on a low traffic street. Instead, it makes more sense if we're actually anticipating these things at the intersection of more prominent roads. And so we specifically included the location criteria that it be at the intersection of collectors or near a collector or a collector and arterial. And looking at that, that's part of the reason why we identified sort of out here at Corvallis and Mountain View as well, and also at potentially this intersection, Hoffman and Gun Club Road. Now, again, just like the existing code, this is not a requirement. There's no requirement to do a commercial use in the mixed residential zone right now. It's just an allowance. It gives people flexibility of something else that they might want to do with their land. It's the same basic principle. This would just allow a developer or someone who's wanting to create more of a walkable sort of mixed-use neighborhood to serve some of the residences getting constructed there. It would give them the opportunity to take advantage of it. We don't anticipate that these are going to pop up like at each one of the intersections or places that we identified, but we do see that they could potentially work at those locations, and so that's why the code is written like that, to allow the possibility of someone to take advantage of that. So basically, that's the code, the proposed changes. You will see that there's associated changes in subchapter 17 that would have to be made. One of those changes specifically is, as we're talking about it, the Planning Commission considered, are these areas appropriate for marijuana retailing? Currently, the entire southwest area, the entire mixed residential zone allows marijuana retailers. We felt like generally that was not an appropriate thing for a neighborhood-oriented residential spot. We currently allow marijuana retailers in our mixed-use pedestrian-friendly commercial zone, as well as in our industrial areas. So we didn't feel like it was unnecessarily burdensome to them or anything like that. So yeah, basically that's the code change. I'm happy to go into it in further detail. We did, again, just like with the non-conforming use standards, because this is a zone change, we sent every affected party notice that this code change was occurring. We did get a couple of just questions, but no formal comments. The Planning Commission had a public hearing on it. We sent it to the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We did all of the stuff necessary for this review. The Planning Commission heard it and recommended that you folks, unanimously recommended that you folks approve of this code change. They did feel like it was a much better way to try and handle commercial uses within residential neighborhoods than we currently use. So are there any questions?
Questions for the presenter? Let's
Fred,
start with...
regarding Hoffman and Gun Club,
Yeah.
how far from the intersection were people notified?
Oh,
I know there's a residence right there on the intersection, but there are developments all around there.
right. So we just noticed impacted properties.
Okay.
So,
So that house on Hoffman was probably notified, the owners of that house.
you're talking about...
Talking about the White House.
The White House?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a good question.
I mean, that's the only one that I can think that would be directly impacted,
Right.
right there on the intersection.
That's a good question.
It's a rental, if I recall correctly, too.
Yeah. And I do think that commercial uses are allowed there at present, just in that industrial park zone.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the plan, I just want to get a sense
You're talking
of
about the
how
house on the
people-
north
I'm sorry?
side, the house on the north side of
Right.
Hoffman? Okay.
Yeah.
Which, as you say, that's already an industrial use there.
Right.
Counselor Jobe?
Is this an accurate map, like totally updated, or are there new homes already built in the mixed use, the south mixed use area?
So this is our 2020 zoning map, and so you don't see the parcel lines for Brandy Meadows, which
Okay,
are...
so there are homes already
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That's right.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
Counselor Morton?
This is something, having satellite commercial areas is something we've talked about as a council for a long time, particularly to the south, which is, I see, an area that you've targeted. I live near the intersection of Gun Club and Hoffman Road, and I don't see any problem with having limited commercial there if it's, as you say, not drive-through and not auto repair, something like that, but more a business that's more suited to a quiet neighborhood and doesn't attract tons of additional traffic. But I think this is a step in the right direction for what we have been talking about for quite a while.
Councilor Rhodey, did you have anything?
Oh, no, I think this is great.
I have a question. So, and help me understand this. So we look at a new development in the MX zone, then the builder will kind of designate an area where he might want to put some, or somebody may want to put some businesses there.
Right.
And then what about the rest of the area that is all houses? My question is, are we effectively changing the definition of an MX zone, and is this the right approach to achieve what you're looking for?
Yeah, so this is, so essentially how I envision this working is essentially like an overlay, where it will overlay these spots, and like if somebody does take the opportunity to create the commercial lots, then that location is essentially established as an overlay over the zone.
Like as soon as they start a business,
No.
So I'm looking,
Yeah.
20 years down the road,
Yeah.
somebody decides, okay, now I want to put in a bakery. What happens to that person? They're not near that area that's in the overlay. They're in some other part of the MX.
Right. They would, under this, they would not be allowed to do that.
See, to me, that seems like we're changing the definition of what an MX is. And that's fine, but I'm just wondering if this is the correct way to do it. Or if we need to actually change the definition of MX, or, may not make it MX, make it something else where we allow some.
So the mixed residential zone is really a residential zone. The commercial is sort of like, and I mean, it's exactly like Councilor Morton is saying, where my understanding is past discussions have sort of envisioned, how do we create these satellite sort of commercial nodes sort of things? And what I would say is, unless you like went in and specifically zoned where they were going to happen,
Right.
We're not going to be able to create them in the way that it's currently written. What's going to happen is you're going to have maybe one person take advantage of it, but it might be on a residential lot. What this is intended to do is get ahead of dividing the land, because what I see will always happen is the land will get divided, and if somebody wants to take advantage of it, they're going to come in onto a lot that's been designed for residential use. And so what I see this doing is it gives us the opportunity to get ahead of that and to be able to say to developers, you have the opportunity to actually create a satellite commercial area. You could do something like that to sort of serve the houses that you're building around it. And then it gives them the opportunity to sort of lock down where that will be and essentially design around it.
So one last question. Has this been run by the attorney to, did they feel they could defend this easily, if somebody challenged this?
We run everything through our attorney that comes to you folks.
Because I don't know anything about this stuff really, but it just seems very confusing to me, and I would be wondering about it.
Yeah, so, I mean, you'll see sort of how it works, and so it talks about when you look at 47010, it talks about the designation process, and that's really how you designate essentially the overlay that you can then do the commercial activities in. And there's specific location criteria there. So it says they can't exceed a certain size, an area, all of that. So you can see that there. 47010. Location for, yeah, you can see that.
When I was reading over this, I pictured in my head how the developers designed the apartments on the outside of town. So there's definitely an area where the apartments are, but then they also built structures for a laundromat and a store and a car wash station in a particular area, so they weren't all spread out. So when you presented this, that's what I was thinking. We plan ahead to have those certain pockets
Yeah.
of
Right.
buildings so that, we can still have all those things, but they're kind of just well presented. So,
Right.
I mean, that's how I'm picturing
And so,
it.
but I'm just wondering, 20 years down the road, somebody can't go into their house and say, well, it's an MX zone, I'm going to start my bakery.
Right.
They can't do that.
They can't do that, right?
Okay.
They could do a home occupation. We do allow home
Yeah,
occupation.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as we were talking about, as we were getting ready, I was scribbling. My comment is get out in front. That's what I like about this,
Yes.
is that we'll be able to get out in front of this before it's always harder to do things after the fact. And since housing's going in and there are some opportunities for small shops, because I saw the size limitation in there, so it's not going to be giant stuff. So I thought that made reasonable sense to have a market that a kid can go down to the store and pick up a quart of milk, figuratively.
Right. And I mean, your get out in front, I mean, we're kind of blessed to be able to think about this right now, because if you think about it, we have undeveloped places where we can actually think about applying this to right now. Similar cities are trying to sort of retrofit existing neighborhoods to accommodate stuff like this, and it's much harder to go in after the fact and try and do it.
So everybody, any additional questions? Everybody okay here?
You had me at bakery.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so I have to follow my script here. So is there anyone else who wants to testify in this? I don't see anybody jumping up and down, so without objection, I'm going to close the public hearing. And then there is a motion to this. Somebody jump in.
I'll make a motion to approve LA 2021-05 and adopt the findings and conclusions in the attached staff report.
Have a motion.
Second.
Second by Core. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now let's move on to the appropriate legislation. To do that, please.
That's page 111.
Yeah. Okay. Someone would be so kind.
I move to read the proposed ordinance Council Bill 2022-02 in full as the text is contained in the council packet for the first time.
Have a motion.
Second.
Second by Counselor Job. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
An ordinance amending Independence Development Code, subchapter 17, allowed uses in residential zones, subchapter 22, density residential zones, adding subchapter 47, neighborhood commercial overlay, and declaring an effective date.
The next motion, please.
I move to read the proposed ordinance Council Bill number 2022-02 for the second time by title only.
Second.
Motion second by Takis. A lot of twos in there.
I know, I got excited.
Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
An ordinance amending Independence Development Code, subchapter 17, allowed uses in residential zones, subchapter 23, mixed density residential zone, adding subchapter 47, neighborhood commercial overlay, and declaring an effective date.
And the final motion, please.
I move to adopt the proposed ordinance Council Bill 2022-02.
The motion?
Second?
Second by Roden. Discussion. I thought this was a good conversation. I thought this was good. I like the fact we're getting in front of that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Bill is passed and will be assigned to ordinance number 1594.
Good. Generalized announcements. Oh, who?
I have a couple. I had a meeting last night with Mayor Coontz, Chief Mason, and City Manager Marty Wine. Very productive about homeless discussions. Had another meeting today with Brent DeMoe from Polk County Family Services and Commissioner Jeremy Gordon. Same subject, good conversation. I just want to reiterate House Bill 4123, the homeless resource grant. If you're interested in supporting this, you can only do it via email to the Joint Ways and Means Committee. Certainly urge everybody to support this. This is a great effort. This is going to bring some money into our community for a very important cause. And Emmanuel, this is for you. The library reader board, the only message I've seen on that for the past months has to do with low-cost broadband, which is an important message to get out there, but it's been out there for a long time. I would really like to see some information about warming shelters on there. A lot of our homeless folks walk around the library, spend a lot of time around the library. It'd be a good way for them to get that information. Thank you.
Councilor Morton.
Yes, everyone needs to get ready because the electronic voting will begin for the Community Awards event sponsored by the Chamber. The first round should start in a few days, and think about outstanding community members and commercial and business services to give annual awards to.
Good. Anything else? Somebody send us home.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a pleasant evening. Thank you very much.